For BBC Radio 3, with studio production this morning by Neil Miners.
This week, immerse yourself in the intoxicating sound world of Arvo Pärt. Arvo Pärt's is music that speaks directly to the soul, and all begins from his own deep spirituality, from the exquisite simplicity of his chamber music to the beauty of his choral music. I explore the enduring popularity of this gentle giant of modern music. Join me, Donald MacLeod, for Arvo Pärt as Composer of the Week, beginning on Monday and then throughout the week at midday and 6:30 here on Radio 3.
Now, Private Passions, and as part of the classical voice season running across the BBC, Michael Barclay's guest today is the composer and singer Alison Goldfrapp.
Alison Goldfrapp burst onto the music scene 15 years ago as lead singer in the duo Goldfrapp with the debut album Felt Mountain. Rock critics reached for adjectives like lush, symphonic, epic. Well, you can judge for yourself because this is the opening of a track called Utopia. Since Felt Mountain, there have been 5 more hit albums, each with a different sound, moving across pop, dance, electronic music, but each featuring the same extraordinary voice. Alongside the 6 gold albums, Goldfrapp also composed the soundtrack for the John Lennon film Nowhere Boy, and the music for the recent Helen McCrory Medea at the National Theatre. So welcome to Private Passions, Alison. And I want to ask you first how you sort of found your voice, how you knew you had it, and how you began to sing or felt that you wanted to sing.
Well, my dad actually played me a piece of music called Camino Burana, and I think that was the first time I actually really heard a human voice and sort of understood that it was actually human making this sound, and I was totally blown away by that. And then also I was at a convent school singing in the choir, and we had an amazing singing teacher, Mrs. Kelly, and I remember doing the scale and getting up to the top note and feeling the top of my head buzzing and just thinking that was the most amazing feeling, and just feeling your whole body's kind of resonating was just incredible. So
and discovered that you had a rather remarkable range.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I didn't really think of it like that then. I mean, I really enjoyed doing it, and and it's always good if someone comes and pats you on the head and says, "Well done." That's always good. Especially as I was really crap at everything else in school. It was, it was something I just loved doing.
And do you do vocal exercises?
I have only just discovered doing vocal exercises, and very useful they are.
Well, they can be a singer's salvation, I think, actually.
Yes,
especially if you use a voice like you do quite a lot.
And as you get older as well, I think when I was younger, I just sort of like, whatever. But yes, warming up and stretching and using those muscles and getting them to work properly is very helpful.
Do you ever play any other instrument?
Playing an instrument? No, I probably bang about on them and make a right old racket, but no, I don't play.
There was a rumour that a clarinet entered your grasp for a while.
I did play the clarinet, yes.
But
I was going to buy another one, actually, just the other day, because I think I'm sort of rediscovering it. And also, it's really great for your lungs, it's great for the voice.
If you really want to try out your lungs, get a saxophone. That'll take even more breath.
Well, Will plays the saxophone. He's really great at it.
So the first music you've chosen today features a choir of extraordinary women's voices from Bulgaria, which you saw them in concert here.
Yeah, the Royal Festival a long time ago, yeah.
And what was it about this that you liked?
Well, there's something so immediately emotive about their sound. There's sort of otherworldly sound that has this very melancholy sound to it. It kind of fills me with joy and wrenches my heart at the same time. I love the way that ends.
There's a wonderful rawness to it too, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
although they're taught, there also is a kind of something which goes back to quite a primitive primal sound.
Yeah, apparently back as far as, was it Byzantium and, I don't know how you say it, Thracian times? Is that how you... Yeah, I mean, I suppose they're based on traditional Bulgarian folk songs and sung in a very traditional style, yeah.
Well, I don't know how your Bulgarian is, but
Not very good.
that was, unless you can correct me, Pilențepe, a modern arrangement of a traditional Bulgarian folk song, roughly translated as Birdie Says, the Bulgarian state radio female choir. Actually, that brings us to an interesting point, doesn't it? How much do you think it matters that we do understand the words, the lyrics? So sometimes for you, are they just sort of tonal colours, the words, or are they very important in terms of their own literal meaning on their own?
Well, I think it varies, yeah. I think lyrics can be incredible storytelling and it's very evocative, but ultimately I think, yeah, for me it's about the sound. And so I'm quite happy to listen to something I have no idea what it's saying. I mean, for instance, that piece of music I find so emotive. I know I wouldn't have a clue. I mean, they could be talking about, buying some hairspray down at the local Tesco's or whatever. It doesn't matter, I suppose, ultimately, I think. I think it depends what you're trying to convey, really.
Because listening to your music, sometimes...
you can't understand a word what I'm saying.
Obviously, the overall feeling that you're trying
Yeah.
to get across, the words are important, but quite often just the way you'll use a vowel or something to extend a line is more to do with the sonority than the precise meaning.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an instrument, isn't it, like any other instrument, so... And also I think singing's very, it's a very physical thing, it's a very spontaneous thing in a lot of ways, so maybe the emotion comes before the thinking.
But I think what you're saying to a certain extent is a bit like the music you've chosen, which is very interesting for this programme. What you'd probably say is you don't really care about the label, it's whether it speaks to you, and that's the same too of songs and words, isn't it? It's, does this music say something?
I mean, there's lots of singer-songwriters that I like listening to are French, and again, I can't understand what they're saying, but I love the sound of it and the emotion of it, the sensuality of it, and I suppose that's what's so wonderful about music, isn't it? That it really speaks to people in a way that unlike anything else, I think.
This next piece is by the tango composer Astor Piazzolla, accompanying the singer Amelita Baltar. How did you discover it, and what made you think this is something I like when you heard it?
I love a little bit of tango, and they're the most incredible musicians, so together they create this wonderful, intense and sensual world.
Well, I can give you an idea about what they're singing about here, because I've got a translation, which is, I will die in Buenos Aires. It will be daybreak. I will keep the things needed to live. My humble little poetry of ballads and goodbyes. My tobacco, my tango, my handful of spleen.
Oh. Very good.
Wonderful voice.
Really wonderful, yeah.
Amelita Baltar performing Astor Piazzolla's Ballad for My Death. And by the way, all of Alison Goldfrapp's choices today are on the Private Passions page of the Radio 3 website, where indeed you can download podcasts of the programme and other ones too. Just tell me a little bit about working with the other member of Goldfrapp, Will Gregory, and how you actually go about putting music together. Does one of you come up with certain things and says, let's try this, or do you both sit in the studio together? How does it tend to develop?
Well, we do. We sit in the studio together, and there's we do a lot of jamming.
Yeah, improvising. Yeah.
Improvising, yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes we can spend hours and hours, days and days just playing around and, really finding sounds that inspire us. So sometimes I'll come to the studio with a melody or a specific idea about a song or a sound, but a lot of the time it's just us together, just finding our way around, talking about sounds. It's really starting from nothing, and just improvising, a lot of improvising.
And so do you quite often...
And we record absolutely everything. So, because you never know, there might be just like 2 notes that you just go, ooh, or some kind of harmonic thing that happens, or it's always the little sort of happy accidents that you...
Which you can't then redo.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
And do you sometimes put the words on afterwards?
Yes, yeah.
That's a very interesting difference, I think, between the way some people work. And some people think that they have to set words, and other people want to write something and then put words to it.
It is very different putting words to an existing melody. Sometimes it can be a bit of a nightmare, actually. Sometimes, I'll just, because I'll just make sort of vowel sounds. Sometimes I'll just say something and that will set off an idea for a lyric, or they evoke the atmosphere of the music, and the sound of the voice evoke a kind of idea. So there's no
hard and fast rule.
No, not at all. No. And I think sometimes things happen really quickly. I mean, at Annabelle, for instance, we pretty much did instantly.
It's lovely when that happens.
It is exciting. You think, yep, done, finished, woo, go home now. And then spend another 2 years making the rest of the album.
Do you like a bit of solitude, and you like going for walks and going out early in the morning before dawn and nature?
Yeah. I've been brought up with that sort of behaviour.
Yeah, it started early in your family.
Yeah, my dad was always, he'd always have to get if there was a full moon, we'd have to get in the car, drive to the sea, which is about an hour and a half away. And yeah, he liked to get up before dawn. We'd have to get in the car, go to the woods, walk into the woods, sit in the woods, and we weren't allowed to talk. It was about listening, and
well, that was a rather good thing for a budding musician.
Well, yeah, good training, how to listen, and so yeah, he would often play us music, and we'd have to sit down and discuss it, and say how it made us feel and what it made us think of. Yeah.
What kind of upbringing was it? I think you said once your father was almost a kind of closet hippie.
Yeah, he probably was.
He worked in advertising.
Yeah. He did when he was younger. Yeah, he hated it though. He gave it up because he hated it so much. And then he worked for various charities actually, and he painted a lot and wrote poetry and went off trekking for weeks on end, and he was an adventurer and a romantic.
This next music is wonderfully romantic, since we were talking about romantic and romance, and it's kind of become idiosyncratic to summon up a certain kind of mood, because it was used so strikingly by Visconti, wasn't it, in Death in Venice?
Yes, I saw this film when I was in my teens, and it had a huge impact on me, yeah. I mean, and also Thomas Mann's novella, which is amazing as well. But yeah, it's an incredibly melodramatic film, not much dialogue, really. So Mahler's music plays a huge role in the film. It gives it a real voice and poetry. And, I love the aesthetic of it.
Well, music and visual imagery is something we'll come on to, but it is extraordinary, isn't it, how very often, I mean, there was also the Elvira Madigan, which was Mozart piano concerto, how a certain film married to a piece of classical music can take it to a huge audience. I mean, there is an audience for it to start off with, but it can widen it so enormously.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think pieces of classical music we use in advertising, when I was a kid as well, which I'd probably never have heard of unless I saw them like that. So yeah, and when music and visuals work together, it's just the most amazing thing. I mean, it's heaven.
Well, we can conjure up that wonderful lagoon in Venice, can't we, as we listen to the Adagietto from Mahler's Fifth Symphony. Claudio Abbado conducting the Berlin Philharmonic in music from the Adagietto of Mahler's Fifth Symphony, music which Visconti used in his film Death in Venice. Can we talk a little bit more about film, Alison? Because I know it's been extremely important to you. In fact, you sometimes escape the world by going into the cinema, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I love going to the cinema, especially in the daytime. And on my own, actually. I really like going on my own. I just think when you go on your own, I think sometimes people think I'm a bit odd because I go on my own, but I think you absorb things in such a different way when you're on your own. So I actually do like that and enjoy that time to really kind of immerse myself. And during the day is always good because it always feels a bit like you've kind of bunked off school. And when it's really hot in London, sometimes I dive into the cinema for relief.
In fact, your partner's a film director, Lisa Gunning, and together you made a series of films to go with the most recent album, Tales of Us. They were shown at cinemas and film festivals, not just online. So there really is a kind of collaborative effort involved in those, isn't there?
Yeah, that was great doing that. That was a really wonderful experience, actually. Yeah, that was the first time we'd ever really made anything like that for Goldfrapp. And, yeah, Lisa did a grand job. Yeah, I still look at them now and think, oh, yeah, I really like those. And this is the first time I sort of felt that the music and the imagery really worked so well together, you know.
They conjure up the dream-like atmosphere of a lot of the songs, or even nightmares in some ways.
Yeah, they've got this sort of sultry kind of tension there, subtle, but yeah.
For the soundtrack to the Sam TaylorWood film, actually she did this programme too, about John Lennon, Nowhere Boy, you worked in the Abbey Road studio and you had a full orchestra there. What was that like, and what did you sort of learn from that experience?
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, it's always amazing to, you know, the more musicians there are, the more incredible it feels. And we had a little orchestra on this album, Tales of Us, as well. And, yeah, it's always amazing to hear something that you've dreamt up, you know, in your little room somewhere in the countryside, and then to go into somewhere in an amazing studio like that and hear it sort of in full 3D, you know, amazingness. It's very exciting.
Well, the next piece is an extraordinary work. I must say, I'm mad about it. It's by Ligeti. It's Atmospheres, which Kubrick used in 2001, A Space Odyssey, although it's quite well known in its own right. But it was marvellous to hear a director like him finding something which was quite innovative and avant-garde to get this idea of a brave new world.
It's scary.
Did you encounter it in the film, or did you hear it separately?
I heard it separately.
Oh, that's interesting.
Actually, yeah. No, I love all those all the textures and harmonies sliding and merging, and it creates this incredible tension. It sounds like chaos and order. And I was listening to it the other night when I was in the house on my own. It gave me goosebumps, and I really did. I was looking over my shoulder because it's so scary. I love it.
Such an extraordinary sound world to conjure up on the orchestra. Claudio Abbado conducting the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra in Atmosphere by George Ligeti, who also rather wonderfully gave us his private passions just before he died.
Oh, really? Wow.
There's not just mystery there, really, is there? There's something you described earlier, a kind of quality of threat, the feeling of something menacing, ominous.
Yeah.
And you've used imagery from horror films, haven't you?
Have we?
Well, the film for your track, Joe, starts with you running through the forest.
Oh, yes.
Pursued by someone who just happens to have an axe.
Yes. So when you said image, I thought you meant actually sort of taking, sort of sampling images. No.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
No, very much inspired by that kind of visual, yeah, definitely.
Because the lyrics go, run, you better run for your life. So one feels that maybe that idea of not only horror films, but music that conjures up a sense of fear and anticipation has been
and fairy
important.
tales, I think, as well, very much sort of inspired.
What about writers? Patricia Highsmith, people like that, too?
Patricia Highsmith, yeah. She is the queen of psychological nightmares. Dorothy B. Hughes is another one who inspired Laurel on the album. I think the women are good at doing that. Yeah.
Next music, which is quite challenging for a soprano voice, so I'm sure you appreciate it from that point of view, being one yourself. But it's also music of absolutely wonderful lyricism, beautifully written for the human voice, because it's Strauss, one of his 4 last songs.
Yeah, well, it's Jesse Norman, and who I think's got the most extraordinary voice. Not everyone's cup of tea, I don't think, but when I heard it in my early teens, I was just blown away by its beauty and her power, her voice. And it sounds so sweet and dark and complex. And I always feel like I'm kind of flying through great vistas of emotional landscapes. So, it's wonderful.
Frühling, from Strauss's 4 last songs. Frühling, Spring, from Strauss's 4 last songs. Jesse Norman with Kurt Masur conducting the Gewandhaus Orchestra, Leipzig. Interestingly, there's a large variation in tempo in recordings of the 4 last songs. Some people take it quite quickly, some people take it really slowly. She takes it quite slowly there. But you like slow, don't you?
Yeah, I think I do.
Why do you think that is?
I've often wondered that. Will and I quite often discuss this. I remember when we first started writing songs together, and we presented them to the record company, and then they took them off to the radio, and the radio wouldn't play them because they were too slow. So we were always asked, can you speed it up a bit, please, and put a beat in, which used to infuriate us. Whereas now I think that's much more acceptable, actually, on radio generally. Why do I like to? I don't know. I suppose because there's time to create a tension there, an atmosphere, a sort of languid, sensual. I think some of the best dance records are quite often sort of almost they're sort of verging on slow, they're just sort of tipping. So I think there's definitely something there that's, very appealing anyway.
Well, actually, Strauss does that wonderful thing, doesn't he, of taking a melodic line and making it arch until you think it's never going to end.
Yeah. That's lovely.
You've had terrific success now, to the extent that you play in places like the Royal Albert Hall. And you said that success hasn't corrupted you.
I'm sure it has, really.
Steve Reich next. And I think this is music that Lisa, your partner, wanted you to listen to while you were on tour.
Yeah. Yes, I was in Australia on a very hot, dry day. I was feeling a bit out of sorts, jet lag and being on tour, and I was standing in my hotel room, which was like being in a sort of hermetically sealed ice box, high up on the 10th floor or something, looking out over the city, and I pressed play, and this piece I've chosen is actually called Pulses, and I love it because of the voices and the clarinets together. But oh my God, I remember the first time I heard that, and I think it gives me I love the whole thing. It gives me a sense of motion, of a timeless universe. It's the pulse of a machine and of a human. It's coldness and warmth. I find it incredibly moving and kind of life-affirming. It's the sound of life, death, eternity, and infinity. It's the sound of everything. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like the sound of life and everything.
Yeah, and human breath is very important, isn't it?
Yeah.
The way those rasping clarinets come in and out of focus.
That's
That
gorgeous.
was Pulses, the first section of music for 18 musicians by Steve Reich, performed by the Ensemble Moderne. As we were saying, it's all to do with breathing, really, and human breath is such an extraordinary thing. You can make music with it, even without singing. I mean, just the sound of breathing can be very evocative, can't it? Is it something that you like to play with when you're recording?
I probably do, yeah.
You did just then, as you said that. I probably.
I like the sound of breath in a voice. I do like that, yeah.
Now, we're going to end with music by that extraordinary film composer, Ennio Morricone. This is from a 1969 movie called Vergogna Schifosi, Dirty Angels, directed by Mauro Severino. It's an obscure, and some may say deservedly so, Italian thriller, which features beautiful young people wearing tiny swimsuits, lounging about on the beach on blow-out chairs. But with this rather extraordinary soundtrack, which is perhaps a cut above the visuals. Did you find this from the film, from seeing the film, or did you find it actually because you heard the music and liked it?
I heard the music and liked it. It's actually I've got an album at home called Mondo Morricone, which has a lot of his scores from various. I mean, he did so many.
Very prolific.
Oh my goodness, yes. There's tons and tons and tons of stuff out there. So this album is a lot of those maybe less well-known scores that he did. So yeah, I just love the sort of languid sound and then the fabulous wordless vocals of Eda Del Orso, who sang a lot on his film scores.
If you do want to watch the visuals and enjoy the summer beach as you listen, take a look online. And in one scene, a giant table descends from the sky with delicious food on it. It is, after all, an Italian fantasy. Well, I think on this note of fantasy and indulgence, I should thank you, Alison Goldfrapp, for introducing me to this and indeed all the music today.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, it was a real treat, listening to all these songs and these pieces of music again. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Music from Ennio Morricone's score to the 1969 film Dirty Angels. Michael Barclay's guest on Private Passions was the singer and composer Alison Goldfrapp. The producer was Elizabeth Burke, and it was a Loftus production for BBC Radio 3. Next Sunday at the same time, Michael's guest is the artist Rachel Nicholson. That's here on Radio 3 at midday next Sunday.
The Classical Voice on BBC 2, BBC 4 and BBC Radio 3. This weekend, Radio 3...